I used to believe that blood meant something. Growing up, I learned quickly that love in our house was transactional. My mother gave affection when it was convenient, and my father offered attention only when it didn't interrupt his schedule. I spent most of my childhood watching other kids be held and nurtured while I learned to keep my needs tucked away like unwanted laundry. Still, despite all the years of cold shoulders and disapproving glances, I never thought they would abandon me like this. Not when I needed them the most, not when my children, their grandchildren needed someone to hold them while I lay on an operating table, not knowing if I'd come back. It started 2 months ago with a persistent pain in my lower abdomen. At first, I thought it was stress. Being a single mom to 4-year-old twins, Illy and Emma, doesn't leave much time for anything else. But when the pain began waking me up at night and causing nausea that kept me from eating, I finally went to see a doctor. The scans revealed a large ovarian cyst, benign thankfully, but the doctor was firm. Surgery wasn't optional anymore. It was urgent. I nodded through the appointment, heart pounding. My first thought wasn't the pain or the risk. It was the kids. Who would watch them while I recovered? I didn't have the luxury of a partner. Their father was a ghost, vanishing the day I told him I was pregnant. My friends were working full-time. Daycares wouldn't take them overnight. I had no one except my parents. As much as I hated the idea, I swallowed my pride and called them. "You want us to take the twins for how long?" My mother's voice on the other end of the line was already laced with irritation. "Just 2 nights," I pleaded. "I'll be in the hospital for the surgery and 1 night after. I just need someone to be with them, make sure they're fed, safe." There was a pause. Then a scoff. "You always do this," she muttered. "You expect everyone to rearrange their lives for your choices. You decided to have kids alone, remember?" I bit my lip. "Mom, I'm not asking for anything permanent. Just 48 hours, please." I could hear my father in the background. "Tell her no, we have concert tickets for that weekend. We're not canceling our plans again for her mess." My mother didn't even hesitate. "You heard your father, we're not babysitters. Honestly, it's exhausting how you always act like we owe you something. You're a grown woman, start acting like one." My throat tightened. "I'm getting surgery. I might not be able to walk for days afterward. I'm not being dramatic. I just need help." Her reply came sharp and cold. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before becoming a burden." The phone line went dead. That night, I cried into my pillow while Illy and Emma slept beside me, unaware. I stared at the ceiling, every breath heavy with pain, not just from my condition, but from the decades of rejection finally collapsing in on me. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn their love. Straight A's, perfect behavior, even pretending I didn't mind when they forgot birthdays or belittled my dreams. And still, here I was, their daughter, a mother, terrified of dying, and all they could say was that I was a burden. 2 days later, they posted pictures on Facebook from the concert. Smiling, dancing, beer in hand. Hashtags like #freedom4ever and #no-stress-weekend beneath every photo. I stared at the screen from my hospital bed. Roman IV hooked into my arm, stomach stitched from the laparoscopic procedure, and tears quietly tracing down my cheek. They knew where I was. They knew what I was going through, and they were celebrating their freedom from me. It was only because of my neighbor, Mrs. Rosenthal, a retired teacher who'd watched my kids play in the front yard for years, that I wasn't forced to cancel the surgery altogether. When I broke down crying at her door the night before, she didn't hesitate. "I've got them," she said, rubbing my back. "You go get better." She brought over puzzles and coloring books, set up a movie night for the twins, and even packed a bag to sleep on our couch. She wasn't my mother, but in that moment she gave more love than my mother ever had. The surgery went well. Physically, at least, the doctors were kind. The nurses smiled gently. but even their warmth couldn't fill the cold that had settled in my chest. When I came home, Emma touched the bandage on my stomach and whispered, "Mama boo, boo." "Yes, baby," I whispered. "Mama is okay now," but I wasn't okay, not really. Something had shifted, something deep, something final. That night, I opened my laptop and deleted my parents from the emergency contact list at the kids' preschool. Then, I removed them from the photo album on the wall, the one labeled family. I tossed their photos into a drawer and shut it, not in anger, but in clarity. They made their choice, and I was about to make mine. Silence filled the pre-op room, broken only by the occasional beep of machines and hushed footsteps outside. I lay there in a thin hospital gown, cold air brushing my skin, and Roman IV slowly pumping fluids into my arm. My hands trembled, but not from fear of the surgery. It was everything else, the loneliness, the betrayal. The quiet realization that no one was coming, no one from my family, at least. I had filled out the hospital forms that morning with shaky hands. Under emergency contact, I'd written down Mrs. Rosenthal's name. I almost cried doing it, not because it hurt to cut my parents out, but because I realized how little it changed. They had never really been in. A young nurse with kind eyes approached. "You doing okay, sweetheart?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Just nervous," she smiled gently. "It's normal. Is anyone here with you?" "No," I whispered. "Oh well, don't worry. We'll take care of you, okay?" She meant well, but the words landed heavily in my chest, like a bandage slapped over a wound still bleeding. "We'll take care of you." That was all I'd ever wanted. Just once, for someone to say, "You're not alone in this." But here I was, facing surgery, cut open, stitched back together while my own parents danced at a concert and posted selfies like they were teenagers. As they wheeled me into the operating room, bright lights blinding and sterile air biting at my skin, memories flooded in. My 7th birthday, when I waited by the door with a party hat on, cake untouched because my parents forgot to come home on time. My high school graduation, when I scanned the crowd and saw every parent clapping proudly, except mine. They arrived late, left early, and told me afterward it wasn't that big of a deal. And the day I told them I was pregnant, when I expected shock, maybe disappointment, but still hoped for love. Instead, my father had sighed and my mother had looked at me with disgust. "You always make things harder for yourself," she had said. "Don't expect us to fix your mistakes." I had told them I didn't need their help, but I had lied. I woke up groggy, pain dull and deep in my abdomen. The recovery room was quiet, a nurse checking vitals at my side. I blinked slowly, waiting for the world to come back into focus. Everything went well. The nurse said gently, "You're stable, rest now." I wanted to ask if anyone had called. Maybe they had a change of heart. Maybe someone left a message, but I didn't, because I already knew. My phone, when I finally checked it hours later, was empty. No calls, no messages. No one had even asked if I was alive. Not my mother, not my father, just silence. Mrs. Rosenthal brought the twins to visit the next evening. Illy held a stuffed dinosaur in one hand. Emma had drawn me a picture of a stick, figure me with a pink smile and big open arms. "Mama, we miss you," Emma said, climbing gently onto the hospital bed. "You hurt?" "A little," I whispered, blinking away tears. "But I'm better now." Mrs. Rosenthal handed me a thermos of homemade soup and a warm smile. "They were angels," she said. "And don't worry, I've got them until you're fully back on your feet." Her kindness was overwhelming. She didn't owe me anything. We weren't family, and yet she showed up. Without hesitation, my parents had told me I was a burden. But Mrs. Rosenthal saw me as a neighbor, a mother, a human being. That night, after the kids left and the room went quiet again, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I thought about how fragile everything felt. My body, my trust, my sense of self-worth. But something unexpected stirred under the weight of it all. Not anger, not even grief, just resolve. If they could so easily walk away when I needed them the most, then maybe they were never my safety net to begin with. Maybe I'd been holding on to a fantasy of family that never existed. I wasn't a burden. I was someone who had survived everything they didn't care to help me through. And from now on, I wouldn't wait for anyone to choose me. I'd choose myself. When I was discharged 2 days later, I walked slowly but upright, holding Emma's tiny hand and Illy's dinosaur tucked under my arm. The autumn air stung my skin, but I breathed it in like a promise. We got home to a warm meal and a clean house, thanks again to Mrs. Rosenthal. The twins ran inside, giggling, and I stood in the doorway, watching the sunset stretch across the sky. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel sorry for myself. I felt awake, and I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something better. Recovery was slow and painful in all the ways I didn't expect. Physically, I healed day by day. The incision stopped stinging, and my strength returned with careful steps and whispered encouragements from my twins. But emotionally, that was a battlefield no one could stitch closed. What do you do with the kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than a scalpel? When your own parents, the people who held you when you were born, decide you're disposable the moment you need them. You burn and then you rise. The first few weeks back home were heavy. Every sound from the kids reminded me I had to be everything: mother, protector, provider, healer, all at once. No fallback, no emotional support. But in the quiet moments, when the kids were asleep and the house hummed with silence, I began to write. At first, just scribbles in a notebook, thoughts, memories, anger, then reflections, questions, a list titled, "What I Deserved But Never Got," a mother who showed up, a father who defended me, a safe place to fall. I cried over that list for 3 nights, but on the 4th night, something changed. I took a red pen and wrote across the page, "What I will build for myself." It was the first time I looked forward instead of back. I started therapy again, this time not to understand them, but to understand why I kept hoping they'd be different. My therapist, a gentle woman named Jaya, helped me unlearn the idea that love had to be earned, that my pain was something to apologize for. They didn't fail you because you were weak, she told me during our 3rd session. They failed you because they lacked the capacity to love in the way you needed. That line stayed with me, not because it let them off the hook, but because it set me free. As I healed, I started building again. I revamped my old blog, one I had abandoned after becoming a mother. I titled a post, "When Family Calls You a Burden," and wrote the truth. Every word, every hurt, every time I was let down and left behind, it wasn't a revenge piece. It was raw, honest, and written for every person who had ever felt alone in their darkest moment. I hit publish, heart pounding. I expected a few quiet views, maybe some hate. Instead, the post went viral. Thousands of comments, emails, stories from women and men who had also been cast aside, who read my pain and said, "This was me too." I felt seen. Not by my parents, but by a community of strangers who finally understood what I had carried alone for so long. One night, while folding laundry, I got a text from my father. "Saw your little blog post. You should be ashamed airing family business like that." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't cry, I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked his number. Then I did the same with my mother's. I was done explaining myself to people who had never truly listened. The more I wrote, the stronger I felt. I started doing interviews, podcasts, a guest article on a parenting site. People wanted to hear from the woman who stood back up after being left to fall. The sweet revenge wasn't in hurting them. It was in thriving without them. Every time I dropped my kids off at school with a lunch I packed with love. Every time I laughed with Mrs. Rosenthal over tea on the porch. Every time someone messaged me saying, "Thank you for telling your story. I thought I was the only one." Yeah, I won. Not out of spite, out of power. I made one final decision that sealed it all. I changed my last name and the twins too. We took on my grandmother's name, a woman who had once told me, if your parents can't give you love, give it to yourself 10 times over. It was a fresh start, a declaration. We were no longer carrying the name of those who walked away. One morning, months later, Emma climbed into my bed with a picture she had drawn. A house, a garden, me, her, Illy, a sun that looked like it was smiling. She pointed to me in the drawing. "This is you, Mama. You have a big heart, do I?" I asked, blinking back tears. "Yeah, you keep us all safe," and that was it. The most perfect revenge, not their pain, not their guilt, just my peace.